Summer, 1764. The sprawling, mountainous region of southeastern France is defined by its agriculture. For the families living here, survival relies entirely on watching over vulnerable herds of cattle and sheep in the open countryside. A young woman tending her cattle in a field is suddenly rushed by a massive, unidentified predator. She survives the charge, but only because the bulls in her herd managed to fend the creature off with their horns. The description she gave authorities was highly specific. She detailed a beast the size of a calf, with a broad chest and a maw full of razor-sharp fangs. She claimed its ears sat straight up on its head like horns, and that it could leap enormous distances in a single bound. Over the next 3 years, the horror escalated. More than 100 people were killed. Victims were ambushed alone in fields, and sometimes snatched mere feet from their own doorsteps. The attack pattern was grim. Victims were found with their throats torn out, their bodies carried away, and at least partially eaten. Administrative records and dozens of eyewitnesses anchor these events in history. What began as a series of rural attacks became a documented national crisis, verified by dozens of people who saw the creature in the flesh. The sheer resilience of the creature added to the panic. In October of 1764, 2 hunters cornered the beast and fired on it at close range. The creature staggered under the impact of the heavy lead musket balls, but then simply regained its footing and walked away into the woods. King Louis XV personally intervened. He dispatched his own master of the hunt and a team of expert wolf hunters. They arrived, tracked, and killed several massive wolves, but the murders continued. If the greatest hunters in the French Empire couldn't track it, and multiple point-blank musket shots couldn't kill it, what biological animal was actually committing these murders? The standard historical explanation points to a pack of large wolves. This makes logical sense, as wolves were responsible for thousands of deaths across Europe during the 18th century. This chart shows typical European wolf attack demographics. You see a high rate of livestock and child victims, but they avoid healthy, full-grown humans. But in Gevaudan, the pattern breaks. The adult victim rate in this 3-year window is 6 times the historical average. These unusual demographics led to a second theory, an armored hybrid. Some suspect that local hero Jean Chastel bred a massive mastiff wolf mix and trained it specifically to hunt humans. To account for the deflected bullets, theorists suggest the dog wore thick boar hide armor, allowing Chastel to orchestrate his own fame as the man who finally ended the slaughter. While a trained armored attack dog accounts for the deflected musket balls and the targeting of adults, modern naturalists look at the survivor testimonies and point to a completely different exotic suspect. German naturalist Karl Hans Tocke proposes that the beast was an adolescent male lion that had escaped from a wealthy aristocrat's private animal menagerie. The bizarre eyewitness descriptions align with real lion biology: the long leaping strides, the use of claws to attack, which is uncommon in canines, the long thin tail, the dark backstripe, and even the spots often found on younger lions all match the survivor accounts. 18th century farmers likely failed to recognize a lion because their only exposure to these animals came through printed illustrations. These drawings strictly depicted fully grown males with massive manes. Faced with a maneless, spotted adolescent, they lacked the biological framework to identify it. This explanation turns a legendary monster into a tragic consequence of human carelessness. If Tocque's theory is correct, an escaped animal from an aristocratic collection was responsible for over 100 deaths. Since there is no surviving genetic material to test, the biological trail ends here. However, the paperwork that documented the attacks reveals a different kind of evolution: how a local predator became a national obsession. The driving force behind the panic was the printing press. The beast became an early national viral news story, amplified across the country by a rapidly expanding mass media apparatus. Publishers realized that fear drove sales. These printed broadsheets utilized sensational, gory depictions to maximize their profits, taking a lethal wild animal and depicting it as a mythological monster. This media frenzy ignited in the middle of the Age of Enlightenment. France was locked in a violent ideological transition, caught between the new world of scientific rationalism and the old world's deep obsession with superstition and the occult. The attacks occurred during a period of severe religious and class unrest, on the very doorstep of revolution. In this environment, the story of the animal took on a life of its own, mirroring the deep social anxieties of 18th century France.